I'll take the first minute to just introduce the session.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. For those of you who have just joined us and could not attend the sessions earlier, the recordings will be up on the platform soon, so you can check it out there. As we speak, 2 networking lounges are going live. If you would like to meet Stephanie from GIZ or Azhar and Hira on the Incubators Roundtable, please head over to the networking lounges now. Up next on this track, we have a stellar panel discussion lined up on catalyzing rural micro-entrepreneurship in partnership with DeHaat and SIFI IIM Lucknow. On the panel today, we have Shashank Kumar, CEO of DeHaat, Anil Miskit, advisor at Accord and Adivasi Innovation Hub, Depratim Das, CFO IIM Calcutta Innovation Park, Pratnya Godbole, CEO Diasra Foundation, Professor Prakash Singh, Executive Committee Member, SIFI IIM Lucknow, Nidhi Arora, Executive Director, Dhriti. Over to you, Anil.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot to the Wilgrow team for giving us an opportunity to bring up this interesting discussion, catalyzing rural micro enterprises. It's a complex topic, and we can look at it from different angles. So what we would like to do is, in this session, would request the panelists to wear different hats, take an helicopter view, zoom down and take a bird's eye view also. Look at it from a 360-degree also, right? From the community to the rural micro enterprises, to the incubators and the donors, right? We've got to look at it from multiple aspects because it's not one size fits all. And what we design in metros may not fly in the rural areas, right? So with that, what I'd like to do is, the way we've structured this discussion is going to be really interesting. We'll bring in a few controversies also, and we'd also like audience to participate during this panel discussion. We'll set the stage with a little introduction, and then we'll move into some of these micro enterprises. We'll follow it with challenges this team faces and their partners face. We'll then also talk about some of the successes and what should some of the next steps be like, right? So with that, let me request the team to talk a brief about their organization, what are they trying to solve, and some of the categories that they work with, right? Shashank, do you want to go first?
Sure, Anil, and thanks, Wilgrow team. Thanks for having me here. Quick intro, my name is Shashank. I'm co-founder and CEO of DeHaat. DeHaat is a full stack platform for Indian farmers, providing complete end-to-end services to Indian farmers and mostly small and marginal farmers, right from which crop to grow, how to grow, to where to sell. Present in eastern part of India, Bihar, UP, Jharkhand, Odisha, West Bengal, working directly with somewhere close to 400,000 farmers. And these farmers are active on the platform. On day-to-day basis, they are buying a lot of agricultural input. They are raising their advisory-related queries. They are selling their different agricultural produce, whether that's horticulture or staples or pulses. Quickly coming to the subject of the today's panel. So all these wide range of services, whether it's input or output mostly, and all related to last mile. In our business model, in our operating model, it's taken care by the rural micro entrepreneurs, and that's the key driver of our organization. And I think in the rest of the time today, we'll be happy to articulate that aspect. So to serve these 400,000 farmers, as on date, we have created our own exclusive digitized network of close to 1,400 micro entrepreneurs across these states. And that's a quick brief of DeHaat and how these micro entrepreneurs are, contributing to the growth of DeHaat.
Thanks, Shashank. Dhriti, would you like to? Nidhi, would you like to go next?
Sure, Anil. Thank you, and thank you, Wilgrow, for hosting this wonderful discussion. And I get called Dhriti many times, so it's not a problem. In fact, I have a certificate which says awarded to Dhriti Arora. So
maybe you should make it Nidhi dash Dhriti, then it'll be easier.
Yeah, I can't rename it here, but usually I do it. Never mind. I'm okay being called Dhriti as well.
Sorry.
Yeah. So Yeah, so it's a part of my identity. I'm a co-founder at Dhriti. We started Dhriti 16 years back. And our core focus has always been entrepreneurship. In fact, we as an organization and me as an individual, we've seen the entrepreneurship ecosystem evolve over the past 16 years in the country. And when we started, it was a difficult word. People couldn't even spell it. And a lot of people asked us, "Aap karte kya ho? What is entrepreneurship?" So I'm very happy and very proud that we've been a part of this ecosystem, and we are here today where entrepreneurship is being discussed. Entrepreneurship is being looked at in from a serious lens. In terms of our work, we have been focusing on rural micro enterprises ever since we started, but we've also had an entrepreneur incubation angle to our work from the beginning. So we technically started from two ends of this continuum, and we had this vision that at some point, urban entrepreneurs and rural micro enterprises will meet, and I think that's the dream I'm seeing get realized now when we actually have projects on ground where we have entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs who are working with rural micro enterprise clusters. We have a vision of fueling the economy through rural micro enterprises, we call them village-based enterprises. And we recently launched a campaign called Seeding Grampreneurs, which is basically rural micro entrepreneurs. So that's the context in which I'm working, and I'm very happy to be here because I think all of us are headed in the same direction, and I would like to hear more on what this panel has to offer. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nidhi. Pradnya, you come from a different angle. Let's hear you out.
Thanks, Anil, and thanks, Willigro, for having me here. So I lead the Astra Foundation as its CEO. I have been leading it for the past 8 years since its inception. So what we do is we started with and we continue to look at urban micro entrepreneurs. So as Nidhi said, entrepreneurship is very close to our heart, but we come in at it from a job generation angle. And that's really the vision and the mission that we are on. How can we support micro enterprises to start and grow quickly? And through them, how can we make more and more jobs happen? That is the mission which we work with. And we've used technology to reach scale on this one and provide solutions across the spectrum of an urban micro entrepreneur's journey. And when I say micro entrepreneur, it's really the nano entrepreneur. So annual revenue between 5 lakh to about 50 lakh, very local businesses, local community, what is today starting to being called a mass entrepreneur. So that's the middle of the pyramid we work with. It's also referred to nowadays as the missing middle. It's typically working in informal mode. So our attempt is to give them a structure, make them more formal, get them into the systems and help them to grow at scale. And so tech has helped in terms of reach at scale and getting many more to develop quickly. We have about 112,000 platform users today. And we onboard about 2,000 to 3,000 every month. And they come to use several resources that we provide across 40 business processes in the micro entrepreneur's journey, right from information to tools, templates, access to verified and credible services. So in a sense, we are working towards overcoming the challenges of the urban micro entrepreneur. And as Nidhi said, what we are also finding is the urban is now coming very close to rural, and it's there in the entire value chain. And therefore there is this connect between rural and urban, and that divide is also getting lesser. I heard Shashank also talking about farmers being on the tech platform. And in that sense, the digital literacy, the financial literacy that's required to get onto the smartphone and access these platforms is very much now doable. So that's what we're working at. How do we really use tech? How do we work at scale? How can we provide a plug and play platform? We've started with urban micro entrepreneurs, but it is plug and play. So can rural entrepreneurship platforms, ecosystems plug into here to provide the tech success and scale that we've been able to provide for our people.
Thanks, Pradnya. Professor Singh, would you like to talk about your initiative at Lucknow?
Okay, thank you very much first for initiating a very useful discussion and inviting me to be a part of this. We started this initiative approximately 3 years back. 1 year I would completely subtract from that for the complete close down, which was on account of the pandemic. So practically it is 2 years. It was supported by SIDBI, and the mandate was very clear that the startups which will be incubated at IIM Lucknow will only be startups in the space of fintech, and particularly those who have something to do with improving rural livelihood or something to do with financial innovation. So our mandate was very, very specific, because we already had an incubation center at our Noida campus, which was a full-fledged incubation center where they had all kind of startups, even pure e-commerce startups. But we had a very special mandate, and therefore our growth has been very humble. We have around 8 startups as we speak, and another 15 are joining us in the next few weeks. Recently, we went back to the board and we said that we are not getting enough traction because the ecosystem in Eastern UP is not really that great to expect a lot of fintech startups, that too in the space of financial inclusion. So we have been given a mandate that we can go and expand the domain a little bit by including startups in the space of agri-tech. So that's the 2 space which we work on currently, fintech and agri-tech. And we have mostly startups which are virtually incubated. So approximately 60% of our startups are virtually incubated. The remaining 40% are with us, and we provide all kind of incubating supports at a very basic level. So that's what we are doing. We really don't have much traction right now in terms of micro enterprise in and around Lucknow. So this would be a very learning session for me to try and understand how can we scale up our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Singh. We'll next have Debratim talk to us about his initiative.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm Debratim, the CFO at IIM Calcutta Innovation Park. IIM Calcutta Innovation Park is just about more than 5 years old now. It was set up under the aegis of IIM Calcutta itself, and we're located within IIM Calcutta campus. So our purpose statement says that it's actively foster innovative and socially impactful entrepreneurs and enable livelihood creation. So we are actually set up at a time when actually the startup ecosystem was not very mature in the eastern and northeastern part of the country. So from there on, it has been quite a big journey, and there have been a significant progress that we have made so far. We are extensively working in all the, about 5 state governments in the Northeast alone, like Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh. Soon we're going to start a couple of more in the Northeast alone itself. And that is where actually the the rural micro entrepreneurship actually becomes very, very relevant there, because that is one area where we thought that a lot of work is to be done, and then there's a lot of scope for us to build the entire ecosystem there, so that the livelihood generation, things like how to integrate them with the larger ecosystem. So that has been rather neglected over several decades. So that's happening gradually. We are very confident that we take them to that position where they can also find a place in the larger ecosystem or the startup map of the country. So that's a bit from us. So our focus is social entrepreneurship, but we have currently about 200 incubators that we have direct incubators, and state government supported incubators that we have another 400 odd from these 4 states. So that's the journey so far. So
thanks, Devrutim. So I'll just, last but not least, we'll talk about what I'm doing. And moderator Anil Miskit. We work in the Gudalur Valley of the Nilgiris district. We are very focused working with 20,000 Adivasis. And Accord is the organization, which is a 35-year-old organization. In 35 years, we've helped set up a hospital for the Adivasis, a school. And now, over the last 1 year, we're embarking on a new journey. We did set up a few micro enterprises in the past, but what we felt is there was a big gap where we didn't have a professional setup to mentor the micro enterprises. And over the last 1 year, we've been designing the Adivasi Innovation Hub. The intent is to incubate micro enterprises over the next 5 years. For us, innovation is going to be different from the ones in the metro. For us, innovation is retaining the Adivasi values and looking at the needs of the market, current market economy, and blending fine line or treading that fine line. Looking at 3 categories of micro enterprises: non-timber forest produce, agriculture, and product and services. So that's a little background, and we have, with this extremely rich set of panelists, I think we're really going to have a good discussion. Let's jump in quickly into some of the questions that we had. Nidhi, I'll have you talk about what are some of the nuances of rural micro enterprises that you interacted with over so many years? That's one question. And I would also want you to bring up the aspect about women. Are they are they getting the right attention? What is your experience being over the last few years?
So, yes, I think the question about women and the question about nuance is actually very, it's interwoven. It's to my mind, it's 2 parts of the same question. Because when I started working in the rural setting, I realized that enterprises in villages are not individual-led enterprises. In fact, a lot of times they're not even enterprises. They're just part of life. You do many things during the day, and doing an economic activity is just a part of it. And it probably comes from the agrarian background that a lot of our rural communities have. And women are an invisible part of this ecosystem. Women, a lot of times, women are, they are part of the family, so they are part of running the enterprise, but they are not visible. Even when they are visible, they are not seen as entrepreneurs. They are not seen as leaders of businesses. They are just seen as people who are doing an economic activity, probably earning a little amount of money. So that's one part. As part of my work on rural micro entrepreneurship, there has always been this stream. You can call it the gender stream, or you can call it the women empowerment stream, but we've always tried to understand where are the women. In fact, very recently we did a value chain study for 3 states in the country, where we identified value chains where women are likely to be present, and parts of those value chains where the participation of women can be increased. So that is something that's worth doing. We assume that women are there, and women are working in these places, so everything is going fine. But once we go down there, we realize there are challenges which women face, and if we are able to, as an ecosystem, if we are able to address those challenges, the participation of women can increase. Of course, there are systemic barriers, like they don't own property. So you can't do something about it immediately. It's a much larger change. There is the whole outlook. We are recently launching a new project in Manipur, and we were doing our basic conversations with the community. It's going to be a women-led project, and we asked the community elders and Gaon Buras, as they are called, the village headmen, and we asked them that, what do you think about this project? And the first 4 lines of their response was all good. It's going to be a great project. But there was one line that they said, which is really scary. And they said, but this project is also going to give a lot of power to women, and they are then going to start rising. And this is verbatim. This is what we heard. So I'm saying there are a lot of these realities also. So there's a cultural reality, there is a social reality of rural micro enterprises as far as women are concerned. As far as the general reality of rural micro enterprises is concerned, I think what we have to consider is that we cannot look at superimposing something that has worked in an urban setting, that has worked in creating entrepreneurs in the urban setting, also entrepreneurs of a very different kind of. Pradnya spoke about nano. I think that's the term we need to understand. If you Google search nano enterprises, there is only one link that ever comes up. We haven't developed our understanding completely about nano enterprises. And if we have to understand rural micro enterprises, I think that's the word we need to understand, because most of them actually operate in that space. They're really, really small. The enterprise and the domestic life and personal life is all interwoven. It's not seen as a profession, it's seen as way of living. And the aspiration is not to raise multi-crore funding. The aspiration is not to be bought out by a brand. The aspiration is not to so those kind of dreams and aspirations and objectives don't exist. Once we understand all of that, I think then we will be able to do much more effective work with rural micro enterprises. I think I'll stop here.
Thanks, Nidhi. Shashank, before I come to you to get your view on rural micro enterprises, I just want to pick on comment and mention about that, the power equation that you mentioned. So our team at Accord was working with the Adivasi community, and they were bonded laborers. When the founders learned to cultivate tea and teach them to cultivate tea, people started laughing, saying, how can you make bonded laborers as tea planters? Tea planters are visualized as, or any tea planter or coffee planters at high in the society. So imagine changing the power equation when you train a team of Adivasi youth to start cultivating tea, and they become micro entrepreneurs, right? So that's the level of power equation that we have to start thinking about. Shashank, you worked with a number of farmers. Would like to hear your views.
Sure. So in our case, in case of DeHaat, it's an ongoing process, and I'll be very honest and candid that for us, the problem statement has always been related to farmers, not with the micro entrepreneurs, not with the rural micro entrepreneur for that matter. Honestly speaking, when we started working, when we got back into this sector, at that point of time, we were not really aware of this word, right? I mean, we have never heard about this term called micro entrepreneur back in 2011 and 12. But, and then we started working with farmers. We set up our first 2 DeHaat centers by ourselves. We operated for 13, 14 months. And when we experienced good traction around those centers within 13 to 15 months, then we started thinking that, hey, so how we can scale it up, right? And that's where probably we found this word called micro entrepreneur or rural micro entrepreneur as a strong sort of instrument or vehicle to make the entire model highly scalable. Because one side, we wanted to be with the farmers, with every individual farmer throughout the year, whichever crop they're growing. And then at the same time, in fact, we found that, that there are rural youth, there are untapped, human resources which can be leveraged. And they are also looking for some bit of employment or enterprising opportunities. Again, in case of DeHaat, this is something which we have not discovered or invented. By that time, many sectors like micro insurance, your NBFCs, microfinance, rural FMCG, they all have sort of discovered, invented, or tried this concept. I think in our case, we only did the smart adoption. The challenge or the problem with the micro entrepreneur, probably we observed that there is no consistency, right? Because they need complete institutional support, and their strength is to manage the last mile, right? That is their core area, that is their core competency, which none of us can kind of can beat them. But at the same time, to be in a position to manage the last mile in a best possible way, they need institutional support in terms of technology, in terms of capacity building, in terms of linkages, in terms of a lot of hand holding and all those things. So in our case, we only did that. And then with respect to time, we learned that that how much these micro entrepreneurs are important, right? I mean, we could grow from 14 farmers to 400,000 farmers only because of the micro entrepreneurs. And that's why, while the problem statement still remains with the farmers, but for us, the sustainability, the overall sustainability or overall the satisfaction level or the NPS at the micro entrepreneur is something which is very important for us, because if they are not happy, if they are not satisfied, probably our growth will go for a toss as well. So that's why on day-to-day basis, I think this is our ongoing effort, that that how we can increase more and more touch points with the micro entrepreneurs in terms of institutional support. And and that's how kind of we have been evolving, I would say.
Thanks, Shashank. Thanks, Shashank. So, Depratim, this is for you. How do you, so we spoke about the need to look at it from multiple views, 360. How do you see the ecosystem like? And also, if you could comment from a culture standpoint, how does it play a role?
Ecosystem is absolutely different when we see something urban, semi-urban, when we actually go into the rural, deep into the rural areas of the northeastern state. So and culture definitely plays a very critical role, because the role of, particularly if you look at women playing a dominant part in rural micro entrepreneurs, the role of women as an earner in the family. So that itself is seen very differently if you are looking, if you are in West Bengal, Bihar, or you are in somewhere in say Mizoram or Meghalaya, where actually the women, it's actually the women is as the leading bread earner of the family. So, but it's absolutely viewed opposite, with an opposite kind of an notion in other states, where women are looked up, are supposed to look after the family, and not supposed to go out even of the arena of their compound. So that from that point of view, culture definitely plays a very important role, and that's where our effort has been, that to bring them out, because they have the capability and they have shown over the last few years. There's a lot of light being given, and the support that we need is definitely institutional support, as Shashank was mentioning. Without institutional support, this kind of change in the culture, to bring them out in the light and give them, empower the women for taking up entrepreneurship in a small way, whatever way they can, even in if you call it goat rearing, or in terms of fruit processing, or in terms of collecting areca nut leaves and stuff like that. There are multiple examples that we have seen that women are actually taking a dominant role, and when you talk about women, the culture actually definitely plays a very, very critical role there.
Thank you. So let me jump to the next section about challenges, failures, and you also mentioned about support. So Pradnya, there was a reason that you folks started your entity, and maybe this is a good time for us to talk about the ecosystem and how did you see this, and how did you all go about designing a model?
Absolutely. So from everything I've heard here and also the past many years, ecosystem and collaboration within the ecosystem is one very important theme that keeps coming out. There are a lot of players, a lot of, if you look at the journey of any micro entrepreneur, whether it is in the urban setting, rural setting, or even if it is a social enterprise, there is a journey that entrepreneur needs to go through, and that involves touch points with various parts of the ecosystem. So there's money involved. How do I get the money to start my business or to grow my business? What are the compliances required? Are there any registrations, etc.? How do I reach my customers? So these are all the processes that any micro entrepreneur or entrepreneur needs to go through at a general level. Now, whether it's in an urban setting, rural setting, the ecosystem plays a big part in providing that support, in providing what is required on that. Although the process of doing it is different, the documentation might be different, as we've heard here. The way of doing that business itself is quite different depending upon where you're doing that business and who is doing that business. However, the business processes you need to do are still the same. So that's one point in terms of the collaboration and the ecosystem having to come together. The other that is required is institutional support. As again, we've heard here, support is absolutely required for any entrepreneur, right? Now, why is it required? So there's so many things that an entrepreneur needs to go through, and it's a very lonely journey. Wherever you are running your business, it is quite lonely at the top, and trying to do it yourself, you need a sounding board, you need someone to talk to, and more than that, institutional support in terms of knowing what needs to be done. Are you doing it the right way? Is there a better way of doing it? Are there any benchmarks that or best practices that you can follow, learn from others? Those are all the kinds of things that are required. So pulling all of this together and putting the ecosystem together for a particular type of entrepreneur is what we've built the methodology of the platform on. Today, of course, the ecosystem that we've plugged in is for the urban entrepreneur. But very naturally, a social enterprise can, in their journey, we can study what is required as part of the processes in their journey, what is the information, the tools, template services that are required to help a social enterprise. Or if you go directly to the rural micro entrepreneur, what is required as part of their journey, and what kind of institutional support is required there, and what kind of tech enablement will allow that support to drive reach to scale. Because entrepreneurship in India needs to be driven at scale. We need a lot more micro entrepreneurs coming in. So how technology is one way of really reaching scale. So technology enablement of institutional support is what can do that. That also gives you the consistency of service, the consistency of information, the quality of that information. So the micro entrepreneurs, for example, that Shashank is working with, if they had access to the same information every single time, then nobody at the back end needs to really worry about what kind of advice or guidance is being given to the beneficiary. And it's always consistent, the quality of services consistent, right? So these are some of the things of tech enablement.
I know we are halfway through, so we'll have to, in the second half, we'll have to move a little faster. So request all the panelists to keep their responses a little brief. Professor Singh, not many of us talk about challenges, failure, and this is for the rest of the panelists also. Professor Singh, if you could talk about challenge or failure as an incubator, that will really help the rest of the community.
So my take could be sounding little academic to Shashank and Nidhi, because we do a lot of primary study and try to find out solutions to some of the questions. And I actually got attracted to this space around 6-7 years back when I was guiding a PhD scholar on impact assessment of microfinance companies. One of the things which I could very clearly see that of course, the women borrowers were very excited about participating in any kind of an effort. The challenge lied in reducing the transaction cost, which essentially means that they had access to capital. Capital was not a problem. There were a lot of MFIs who were kind of doing very aggressive lending, and there was no problem in terms of getting sufficient amount of capital. The problem lies in that they don't have too many entrepreneurial ideas. Now, to give you a typical example, most of the MFIs will just go ask the women to form a group, and they will just want to lend them. The question which no MFIs wants to answer is, who is going to teach them on what economic activity they should try to build a business model? So my understanding, limited, could be that they don't get into new entrepreneurial domains. They work in traditional businesses. Like, for example, in Lucknow, this chicken curry is so famous. So most of the women around here would be working on that stuff only. They don't have anybody to tell them there are other businesses where they can work on. So, and the second point which I see is the tech. Unless until there is a technology intervention, the transaction cost will remain very large. The last mile will always remain a last mile unless and until you think the technology integration. Many of these business ideas will not be able to reach to the market. So my submission is technology intervention to reduce the transaction cost, and second, somebody needs to teach them on the various entrepreneurial opportunities, because nobody is actually looking at that space. They are just doing something traditionally which they have been doing for generations.
Got it. So I agree and disagree with some of the stuff that Professor mentioned. I think it's important to give them a lot of exposure. But where I disagree is we need to be very cautious, in the sense an idea that works in A community need not work in B community. So we have to be very sensitive to the local terrain, the local geography, and the culture, the values of the community also. With that, let me go to Nidhi and Shashank. Can you talk about failures, one or two that you've experienced?
Can I go first, Shashank?
Yeah, go for it.
I just went first because I wanted to take something from what Professor Singh was talking about and add my bit to it, and then of course respond to what you're asking. Is that it's absolutely correct. The picture that he's just shown us, it's absolutely correct, and there's limited exposure and there is hence limited ideas. My submission here is that, are we going to keep using the word entrepreneurship in its most generic sense, from a startup sitting in Bangalore to a nano woman entrepreneur sitting in Borpeta? If we are going to keep doing that, then we are going to keep hitting roadblocks and failures at a very systemic level. So let's first understand what entrepreneurship is all about, and what am I expecting a Shashank as an entrepreneur to behave like, and that woman who's sitting in Borpeta as an entrepreneur to behave like. So are we talking about producers? Are we talking about contractual enterprises or income generation activities being run for bigger entrepreneurs? Are we talking about entrepreneurs? Once we do that, I think some of our challenges get resolved, and also expectations. And as a person who delves a lot into the science of learning and teaching entrepreneurship, I do a lot of curriculum development work. I know there is only so much a person who's probably a first generation learner or who's not gone through formal education, and the kind of inputs we start giving those people, there's only so much that can change in that individual. So that's my first bit. And then I also see as a failure of incubators like us. We fail to see these different parts of the story, and hence we are offering the same solution. Some of the other challenges I think I face, or we face as an incubator, is that there is a social feasibility of an enterprise, which probably doesn't get talked about too much when we are talking about urban entrepreneurs. But that is a very important part of enterprise feasibility when we talk about rural enterprises. And social and cultural feasibility gets completely missed, and we only look at the financial feasibility, and we look at how great the idea is, how much money is it going to make, how much revenues is it going to get to that woman, and then we forget that the woman will work only 2 hours in a day. We will forget that that state undergoes buns for 27 days in a month. We will forget that piggery is not something that this community is ever going to engage in. Or basket weaving is considered to be an activity for a lower caste. So one section of this village will go nowhere near this activity. Or the women don't have sewing machines. You're assuming that everybody has a sewing machine because she's a woman. So I'm saying there is a lot of non-financial economic feasibility that gets completely missed, because probably, taking from my earlier point, probably we are superimposing something else here. And we are only looking at, success in one particular way.
We'll come to success, I think, next, and I agree with, we have to look at social returns also. But going back to the question on failures, one of the toughest one that you experience that you would like to share with the team.
So early on, we started a project, and I think Dev Pratim mentioned about Areca nut. Areca nut is Supari, and we started a project in Assam on Areca nut leaf plate manufacturing, and it was a project that it got incubated at Dhriti. Now it has become a private limited company, so it's a social enterprise, independently run, and led by one of the co-founders of Dhriti, and also works with rural micro entrepreneurs. It's a success story by all definitions, but we see a lot of failures that we have gone through. The ability of a model like that to be able to scale up to hundreds and thousands of rural entrepreneurs, there are many challenges you face when you are talking about not choosing to make it a contractual process, when you are talking about making it a process where each one of them also becomes an entrepreneur. And at the same time, you are trying to make this entity, which is an independent, non-grant driven entity, to also be profitable. How do you then balance between whether I'm going to keep the interest of this rural micro entrepreneur in mind, or am I going to keep the interest of this entity, this for-profit private limited company that I have formed for the benefit of these people? If this company shuts down, they're all going to be, affected adversely. But if I keep thinking about them, it doesn't work. So I think that's the failure for us, because we haven't been able to crack it yet. And I'm really hopeful that, sometime through this panel or people like who are here in this panel, we'll find a solution.
Nidhi. Shashank, one failure that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, sure. So again, my answer is in the context of this last mile agriculture value chain services. I think point blank answer is firstly retention, and secondly is the uniformity. Right, and I think that's very obvious. We learned over the years, right, that during early days we did not have many things, to put in the plate of the micro entrepreneur, and that's why the overall income level for them might not be sustainable, might not be enough or sufficient for them. So that's why retention was one of the challenges or major challenges for us. I mean, the overall retention was as low as 35-40%. Right. I mean, when we from our side, we used to put best effort, and few of the micro entrepreneurs like Arjunji or whomsoever, right? I mean, and without any notice and nothing, right? I mean, they're working in a perfect manner, and then very next day you get to know that he migrated somewhere, right? Or he started doing something else. So this was one, and the second was, of course, the uniformity, right? I mean, because as one of you already mentioned, that these different micro entrepreneurs, they are from different background, different intellectual level, different sort of let's say education background. But at the same time, as an organization, we wanted to give the same experience to the farmers, right, who are the last or the final end user for us. So we faced a lot of challenges and experienced so many failures around these two things over the years. You are mute.
Sorry, Pradnya, what about you? As a support or enabling function, what kind of challenges do you face?
Yes, so we've tried, and there's been successes and challenges. So we've been working with BIFE, who works predominantly in rural micro entrepreneurship. So BIFE, Grant Thornton, Syngenta Foundation. So these are some of the organizations that we've tried to work with rural entrepreneurs. Where it's really worked is where the facilitation on the ground is. There is skin in the game, where they are really committed to bringing the services or the resources from the platform to the beneficiary in a very close manner, and there's very high handholding. But the challenges really is to get the right business models from the experts on the ground. Because as again some of the panelists were saying, business models tend to vary as the type of business differs, as the geography differs, etc. So getting the right business models, getting the right inputs from experts on the ground that service all of these business models in order to create a template on our side was one of the challenge that we faced. So expert advice, facilitators, these are two, and then of course the language barrier, because a tech platform necessarily speaks in certain languages but cannot cover the different dialects, etc. So again, the efficiency with which the last mile facilitator is able to take the information or whatever the platform provides onto the end beneficiary is also we saw that as an issue.
Thanks, Pradnya. So for the benefit of all the audience and all of us, I think one thing I would like to reiterate and re-emphasize is the sensitivity to on-ground reality. Right? And the next topic is scale. It's easy to say scale it's easy to say let's replicate ideas, but we have to be sensitive to the culture, the last mile, to the education, to the gender, before we go and put the chopper saying let's scale or let's try to replicate stuff, right? So moving to the next section, and we did have a few questions or points from the audience also in terms of challenges. They mentioned about there's a big gap in government policies being implemented in rural areas. Also parts about infrastructure. I'm not sure if anyone would like to comment on the government policies. Anybody familiar in that space and would like to speak about policies?
Yeah. I think what we have seen is that, there are multiple government agencies, both from the central and state. They are not in sync. So there are a couple of deficiencies that we have seen. I mean, schemes are getting devised, money is getting invested or money is getting allocated. But at the ground level, what we have seen is lacking is there is no cohesion between the various government departments who are actually working probably towards the same objective. That's one. The other is they don't have the capability to kind of look at these areas of, upskilling the people to get into this kind of business activities. So implementation is where the main deficiency is from the government side. That's what we have seen.
Thanks.
I think the other thing which the government policies lack is the wrong KPIs or the wrong goalpost. I mean, I know some of the sponsors who talk like that you should have 50 startups in next 1 year. I mean, they are just like counting numbers of startups which you have incubated. So that is something which is an absolutely wrong goalpost setting, that you must have 50 startups in 1 year.
I think, yeah, numbers impact is critical. So let's talk a little bit about scale and success stories. I also saw some of the comments on the chat window. I think many times we're completely skewed, or we go with this horses blind, looking at impact as profits, impact as scaling revenues. What we miss is the softer aspects of it. In fact, as we design our incubator, what we've done is we've kept a clear section on SROI, social return on investments. Can I measure the number of youth I move away from informal debt or high interest loans? Can I measure the reduction in mental health situations? Can I reduce the instances of alcoholism in the community? So those are softer aspects that we are also capturing, including there is the situation that we are in when the Adivasi community, where they feel they are not equal to non-tribals. So can we change that equation, right? So those are some softer aspects that we are keeping in. And with that, I would like the panel's opinion in terms of should rural enterprises scale, right? And who defines scale? Is it the investor? Is it the incubator? Or should it be the rural micro enterprise themselves? Deepan, we'll have you first, and then maybe Nidhi will have you share your.
Okay. Scaling is all, it's totally related to the market, right? I mean, you can scale only when there is there is a market for it, right? So the market is the right factor to determine the scale, because you can only scale if you can actually sell your product. So there's enough customers who will come and buy your product, right? So scaling depends on the market. If the, as you call TAM and all those addressable market and serviceable market, so the market is big enough. So scale definitely is set by the market. Now, if you talk about the village level micro entrepreneurs, there I guess the scale actually, if you talk about, I mean, if talking about if they have a revenue of, as Prajna was saying, that they are probably in the range of 1 lakh to 5 lakhs kind of annual revenue, or max 10 to 15 lakhs. You can't talk about 1 crore revenues, setting them a target of, because that's probably is definitely not achievable at all. So and that will also, and setting unrealistic targets in front of them will also kind of deterred them from kind of this is entrepreneur is not my ball game, or this is businesses. I'm happy with whatever I have been doing. So they are. I would rather say from our experience working extensively in the Northeast and with the village level micro entrepreneurs is they will probably stop at a level when they are able to give jobs to few people within their own community. That's one. They can actually sustain the living expenses of their own family and the immediate next families. So once they reach that level, so they are pretty much happy, and they are not inclined to kind of scale. So the scaling has a different meaning from what we see from an urban entrepreneur. So their scaling is probably they can even if they achieve or they reach out to the entire market within a state, that itself is a very big achievement for them. So they're kind of a very inward looking approach. That's what the traditional approach has been, and the level of satisfaction is at that only.
So I want to bring a counterpoint to it. Scale and markets, right? I would say markets, yes. But if I talk about our community, the honey gatherers, there's a lot of demand for beehive wax. But our community is very close to nature, and they have this tradition for many years where they leave the beehive wax behind and they say, this is for the bears. That's the pact we have with the bears. There is a demand, there is a market. So those are where we need to keep values of the community in mind and not be extractive and impose our notion of scale on them. Nidhi, I'll let you share your thoughts.
I'm with you, Anil, on that. And I think scale, the question is whose scale? So project scale or entrepreneur scale? Project scale, yes. The investor, the donor, the government, the incubator, and the entrepreneurs, everybody is a stakeholder. The entrepreneur scale, I don't think we have the right to decide. So that would be my take on it. And the example you just took about the bee wax, I think it's part of the social feasibility that I was talking about. If it's a community resource, and we cannot make them a cog in the wheel. We can't assume them to be like the machine that works in the factory. That okay, I want XYZ return, so there will be money, there will be people, there will be land. Everybody will work and give me my returns. We're talking about human beings here, so that's my take on it. Yeah.
Shashank, your thoughts with the farmer community you worked on? Should we define scale or should they define their own scale?
I think being a working partner, we should not define for sure, but we should create the right ecosystem so that they can define the scale by themselves, right? That what are those parameters? And again, scale for the micro entrepreneur, rural micro entrepreneur, every time it can't be measurable in a way, right? For example, one quick example, one of our micro entrepreneurs, I always remember, he has been working as a driver in Delhi for 12 years. Must be getting some 8,000, 10,000 rupees monthly, right? His family was back in Bihar, 2 kids, of course, no resources, so no proper care of healthcare or education. He joined us as a driver, he got to know about the program, and then he got interested. He said that I want to become a micro entrepreneur. He became a micro entrepreneur. He's making more than 25,000 rupees monthly today. But more importantly, this is something which is measurable. But more importantly, now he is staying with the family, right? He and his wife, now both of them are taking care of their 2 acres of farm. So according to me, I think this is scale, right? Overall, a sustainable approach. So I think at the level of micro entrepreneur, I think again, if I have to generalize, I would say as a working partner, as a catalyst, we should create the ecosystem so that they can get the right mindset to define their metrics. Firstly, the secondly, it has to be sustainable. Something what bee and wax example you said, right? They decided that, right? For example, so whoever is the partner here, they gave them a confidence. They gave the confidence to the collectors that, hey, so just by selling honey, you will get enough money, right? And hence probably you can keep the wax, intact, right? So that kind of, it can take care of the nature or the bears for that matter, right? So here, this is what the ecosystem I'm talking about. Secondly, again, the another aspect of scale is going deeper and deeper, right? Effectively, we are talking about micro entrepreneur or rural entrepreneur. For example, even for that matter, FPOs, they can be considered as a micro enterprise, right? So we, as a change agent, we definitely work with these micro entrepreneurs. But I think the right definition of scale is that how sustainability is probably after 10 years, 25 years, 30 years, whether those micro entrepreneurs or micro enterprise is still operational or not, and more importantly, spreading positivity in the community or not in a sustainable way, which is possible only if they are going deeper and deeper with more and more value proposition for their respective community, which is hard to measure, but this is my personal belief. You are again on mute.
I'll have to stop you for a minute, and we have 5 minutes more. I'll pass this question back to you, and then the last one key message from every panelist. So Shashank, this question from the audience is that micro enterprises face difficulty in accessing finance. Should we create a credit score for them? And do you think this will help? Right? Any comments on that?
We should, because for any enterprise, effectively your seed or growth capital or credit line or working capital, it becomes one of the bottleneck or one of the most important factor. However, again, based on our experience, we have learned that this is not something which can be done very first day, right? Because to build the rating system, you have to have the history, which is not possible unless and until there is no operational history, right? So this is definitely should be done, but hard to achieve from very first day.
Okay, so the next one is a quick question, rapid fire. You'll have to, any three of you will have to answer this quickly. What stops incubators to work with rural enterprises? Is it only funding? Quick question. Shashank, I'll let you skip this because you've taken the previous one. The rest of the panelists, what stops incubators work with rural entrepreneurs? Is it only funding?
Can I?
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's limited visualization at the end of the incubator of what's possible.
Next, limited visualization of the, sorry, what did you say? Limited
visualization of the incubator in terms of what's possible.
Okay.
I would
For us,
we don't have the ability to understand also.
Ability to understand. Okay.
Yeah, and for us, actually, we have been enjoying actually this activity of going to having to work with the rural micro entrepreneurs, and they have lots of challenges, and working through those challenges actually gives us a lot of satisfaction. So I'd rather say that put it in a different way.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say nothing is stopping us. We just need the right expertise on the ground to come in and fit into the platform. That's about it.
Okay, thank you. So one last message, each of you, for the community, for the panelists, or for the community to take this to the next level. One message from each of you.
Okay, can I go first?
Yep.
Okay, so I am reminded of a comment made by Pavani Bhatt is at IIT Bombay. Some of you might be knowing her. She always used to say that we should stop glamorizing these unicorns, because these create all the wrong kind of noise. So let's talk about initiatives which create employment, as Deepatim was talking about, rather than celebrating these unicorns. That's one of my most important message, which I keep on giving to students here in the IIM system also, that don't think of building organizations which become unicorns. Think of organizations which can create employment.
Next, anybody?
For the rural entrepreneurs, I guess it's very important to be passionate about what they're doing actually, rather than getting swayed by different kind of equations that flows through from different channels, right, or the various stakeholders like government, various agencies, various banks, various institutions. So they need to stick to their passion, and then it will be easier for them to kind of wade through all the challenges.
Two quick things from my side. Firstly, while building any micro enterprise or while working with any micro entrepreneur, put yourself in their shoe. And secondly, uh, don't take a project based approach. 2 years, 3 years. I think this I don't think this works.
From my side, I just want to say that there are enough women entrepreneurs who already are working on a rural micro entrepreneurship model as their production basis, and they have enough social objectives already incorporated in their business models. Let's, as an ecosystem, start investing in them.
I'll go quickly. I think collaboration is the key. Ecosystem, or everyone needs to come together and build this out. I think I'll leave it at that.
I would say design with the community. Don't take a design to the community. I would like to wrap this session. Thank you so much for making time, and we are on the dot. It's been really wonderful having all your opinions, and hopefully we'll stay connected, take this to the next level.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for such a lovely, thought-provoking discussion. For all the participants tuned in, grab a quick lunch and join us back at 2:15 for the next session on the evergreen topic of how to be investment ready. For those who would like to interact with Geet Kalra and Abhilash Parvatina from Eunice Social Business or Alice Goodbrook from Innovate UK, please head over to the networking lounges now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.